Hey guys, it's Austin Harman Mixes, and welcome to my very first podcast with you. I'm super excited to begin what I feel like is going to be a long journey of recording podcasts. And I thought, what better way to start out from a podcast perspective than to start out by telling you how I got into audio. So over this podcast, we're going to be discussing how I got into audio and how I came to be an audio engineer. I really hope that you enjoy this podcast format. I have been working really hard behind the scenes to bring this podcast to life, and I'm super excited to bring it to you. In the future, I'm going to be bringing people onto the show just off to the camera here, and if you're listening just off to my left-hand side, I have another chair and another setup ready for our audience to listen to the thoughts and the ideas of the people who we are going to bring on. I have some great people lined up to actually bring content to you. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into Austin Harman Mixes podcast number 1. Thanks for listening. Let's go. So the format of this podcast is going to be a little bit casual for the very first one. I thought, why not? It's just going to be me. As if you haven't gotten enough of me already, you probably don't know much about me. My name is Austin. If you haven't noticed, my name is also Austin Harman for Austin Harman Mixes, and I also am the president and CEO of the Penn Group. My middle name is Penn, if you didn't know that, so Austin Penn Harman. You get Austin Harman Mixes, the Penn Group, and coming soon, announcing on this podcast, can you even believe this is happening? I am bringing a new line of speakers out underneath the brand called Austin Harman Designs. This brand is going to be my life's work. I've been working on this now for years, and I am so excited to announce that Austin Harman Designs is coming soon. We are working actively on manufacturing the very first line of speakers for all of you out there to listen to of my own design. Can you even believe that? Austin Harman Designs, Austin Harman Mixes, the Penn Group. Well, you're listening to Austin Harman Mixes podcast, and you might be asking yourself, well, why the heck am I doing that? Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am about to turn 30 years old. Can you believe that? About to go over the hill. It's all downhill from there. They tell me after 30, I have been doing audio since I was around 9 years old, and I started out doing audio because a friend of mine, shout out to Matthew out there if you're listening to the podcast, was our audio guy at church. We were just in the wee little 6th grade or so, whenever it was. And Matthew was charged with doing audio, and I was charged with doing the lights. And I'll be honest, I didn't really like the way Matthew was doing the sound. I love you, Matthew. You were in my wedding, but it wasn't getting it for me. So I said, hey, let me give that a go. Granted, it took about a year or so before I built up the confidence of seeing the desk to get behind there and start to twist things. I'll be honest, I didn't really do much, but I did learn something that day, which is that audio was really cool. But that wasn't my first inroad into audio. I had some kind of run-ins and experiences in the past where I thought audio was super cool. Even in elementary school, I can distinctly remember my father upgrading the sound system in my mother's car. And he was an audio guy too, but he didn't actually mix on the desk like we do. He was more of a kind of audiophile, really enjoyed music. And he upgraded the sound system in my mother's car, and we would listen to music very loud growing up, and that's one of my favorite memories of growing up as a family. But anyway, I decided that I wanted to mix audio behind the desk, and this is around 7th grade-ish. And going forward from there, I kind of dabbled in it a little bit, and then I went to some church camps. Shout out to those of you who went to church camp. And I decided to mix audio that summer for the church camp. It was on an absolutely terrible Mackie board that didn't even have a parametric EQ. It just had shelves. It sounded terrible. It was on some custom speakers with JBL drivers, which was pretty cool for the time, and it had a gigantic 18-inch subwoofer built into the wall that absolutely stomped. But it sounded terrible. The PA was bad. The bands were typically bad. And I learned a lot about audio that summer. And And I still go back, even still to this day, to some of the memories and experiences I got that summer. Shout out to Camp Sayokimo, Cymko out there. For those of you who have been to Camp Sayokimo, leave a little comment if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're out there on the podcast listening, send me an email, sales@thepenn.group. And let me know, where did you go to church camp? Did you actually go somewhere cool? How was the PA? I'd love to hear your stories out there. But anyway, I spent some time at Camp Sayokimo, and I came back, and right around that time, the church that I was attending at the time, First Christian Church of Owasso, Oklahoma, back in the good old days, had just built a brand new building, and it was something like a 25 or 30-year capital campaign to get the building built. And they also had plans for a youth center. And I was so excited about this youth center. And when we got in there, we had a really interesting band. And it was my job to mix it because nobody else was there. And I kind of had to learn how to mix analog sound. And I really honestly learned a ton. I was self-taught in the analog arena. And right around that time, too, I had joined a class in high school called Stagecraft, and it was subsequently renamed Theater Tech for those of you out there who participated in something similar in high school. That's fantastic. But in Theater Tech, we would have events come into our high school auditorium, and those events would require a mixer. And we had a gigantic 48-channel console that had built-in dynamics, and it had a crazy 5-band parametric EQ, which was crazy on an analog desk at the time, and 16 auxiliaries. It was massive. It weighed hundreds of pounds and took up an entire room. And I would mix big bands on that desk, and I would also mix big choir and theater shows. And I learned a ton about excellence and standard of production during that time, and I really started to develop a passion for production. And it wasn't just audio for me anymore. I really loved the lights, and I really loved sound. And also coinciding in that same similar time period, I also went to my first concert. I can't even believe I'm going to admit this on camera, but my first concert I ever went to, my first real concert, was actually Celine Dion. If you can believe that. I went with my mother and my sister. And believe it or not, the thing that I still remember to this day is the snare sounded incredible. I cannot even describe to you how good the drums sounded at this concert. It was a concert in the round, so we were right on top of the PA. The PA was right in our eyes, and man, it sounded so good that night. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was a freak. I was like, man, those drums sounded so good. I tried to replicate them any way I could on our little analog desk with the old Pearl jazz drum set that was never going to sound as good as those concert drums, but I was determined to make it so. And that was my first concert experience, and at that time I was hooked. And then the real kicker was my sophomore, maybe it was my freshman or 8th grade year of high school, somewhere in there. I went to my second concert, which was, believe it or not, Nickelback. Now, I'd love for you to post all your Nickelback hate in the comments. Also, send me an email. Please don't. I know that there's a lot of haters out there with Nickelback, but let me tell you something. Nickelback in the early 2000s was the best sounding live band, period. Somebody out there changed my mind. They were the best sounding live band, period. They had gigantic 30 count Clear Brothers line arrays with the i8 subwoofer attachment alongside each cabinet. The PA was enormous. You could barely see anything on stage because the PA was so big. And they had that sucker dialed in perfectly. There are videos out there of this tour. It's the Nickelback Dark Horse Tour. I'll put a link in the description on the YouTube side. And if not, if you're listening on the podcast network, go look up a guy. His name is MMARR. That's his channel name. And he posted a video of that tour, Nickelback playing a song. And there are thousands of comments of people arguing back and forth whether or not it was studio playback or an actual live mix because they seriously sounded so good. And what blows your mind is when that camera shot zooms out, the guy is like 200 feet off the PA and it still sounds incredible. So anyway, I went to a Nickelback show and man, oh man, I was hooked. I wanted to do live audio for the rest of my life. That is what I wanted to do more than anything in the world. I had discovered my passion and I started on a journey that day and forever on. I have been pursuing the dream of becoming a professional audio engineer full time. And life has taken me on a crazy journey. And, it didn't stop in high school, but I didn't actually end up pursuing audio full time, funnily enough. And what ended up happening was that I had some unfortunate life circumstances happen that I will share on another podcast in the future probably. But during my later high school days, my priorities kind of shifted away from audio, and I ended up having to get a job and moving out of the place I was staying. I kind of had a rough family situation going on at the time, and I decided to enroll in a school called Full Sail University because I still was trying to chase the audio dream. And after about 6-ish months of going to school at Full Sail, I kind of had to take a step back and reevaluate the prospect of the economic viability of going to such a school like Full Sail versus a more traditional college. So I decided to kind of shift gears a little bit, and I put audio on pause. I didn't put my dreams on pause, but I put audio on pause, and I decided to enroll in Oklahoma State. Go Cowboys. At the time of recording this podcast, Oklahoma State just got curb stomped in the Big 12 championship. Shout out to the Texas Longhorns, which are going to the college football playoff. But I went to Oklahoma State, and I took about a year of hiatus off from audio. And while I was going to school as a sophomore, so over a year later, I was walking out on what we called Library Lawn, which was a big grass lawn on Oklahoma State's property, just a beautiful area for an otherwise not so beautiful part of the country. That area of Oklahoma is not exactly beautiful by any means, but I was walking out on Library Lawn and I saw a band set up on Library Lawn, and there was just something about that band that drew my attention. And as I kind of hung around a little bit and started paying attention to what they were doing, I realized that I actually knew the sound engineer who was a part of that band. And that sound engineer and I had went back. We had actually attended that church camp I had mentioned at the beginning of the pod together. And I knew him. And I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? And he said, hey, we're a Christian organization. We meet every Tuesday night at a church at the edge of town, and we put on a Christian concert for free. I was like, that's amazing. But at the time, I was very lost, and I wasn't connected to a body of Christ. I just wasn't really interested in getting back in the game, so to speak. So I listened to the concert that night, and I was pretty impressed. And the guy who was mixing audio, his name's Ty. Shout out to Ty. If you're out there listening to the pod, give me a call, buddy. But Ty was mixing, and the guy who he got the stereo from called him from 3 miles away and said, hey, man, I can hear the PA from here, so you guys must be rocking. So it was definitely a cool show, cool experience for sure. And that set in motion a turn of events that I'm forever grateful for. Almost a year later, I was walking with a friend of mine from one class to another, and I was explaining how I wanted to get back into audio. And this was a friend that, quite honestly, wasn't really a friend. It was more of an acquaintance. If you have been to college, you'll know that people who are in your major, you start to see them in all of your classes as you kind of progress through school. And this was somebody who was in my major. And she just looked at me and said, well, I think Overflow, which was that student organization I had interacted with the prior year, she said, I think they're looking for a audio person. You ought to try and go meet with them. Their audio person is graduating in like 2 months. I was like, bet. So I messaged Ty and said, hey, man, I'd really love to come check out what you're doing at Overflow, and I'd love to kind of get into it. And I walked into Life Church Stillwater's campus, right out there on the edge of Stillwater. Shout out to those of you who are part of Life Church, or if you've interacted with it, leave a comment or send me an email, however, whatever suits your fancy. I walked into Life Church for the first time, and it was the first time in quite some time I had stepped into a church. And I just remember feeling like, whoa, there is something very big that's going to happen here. And I just kind of stood there like in awe of like this overwhelming feeling of what was to come. And I ended up shadowing Ty, kind of got back in the game a little bit. The desk that they were using at the Life Church Stillwater campus at the time was the Yamaha M7CL. I hate that desk. It was the first kind of like mainstream 48-channel desk that most people bought. And it was similar enough to analog that with just a little bit of work, you could learn how to use it. But it was still digital enough that you could actually like do a lot of stuff with it. And I could get my mixes to sound okay, but there was just something about that desk that just sounded so hollow and so dry. And that was often the criticism of the Yamaha, was that specific desk was known as being cold because coming from analog would introduce a lot of variations into the sound, and coming into the digital domain, those variations no longer existed. So a lot of the distortion and the character that analog was adding to the desk was no longer there. So anyway, that's an aside. So I was mixing on a M7CL, and they had a regular Sunday guy. And for whatever reason, that regular Sunday guy who was mixing their weekend services kind of moved on. And Ty, who was my friend, ended up taking over the Sunday weekend services as well. But he was about to graduate from college, and I was kind of available. Stillwater, Oklahoma was a very small town, and they were like, you know what, we'll give you a shot. Well, I'll be honest, I was really not a good enough engineer to be mixing Life Church Stillwater. The standard of excellence there was way higher than I could deliver. And I was very fortunate that the pastor at the time, the worship pastor who had hired me, said, you know what, we'll try you out for the youth program, which was a big shot to my ego. At the time, I wasn't quite as astute as far as what I was capable of at the time. And he said, hey, we'll try you out for the youth program. It's called Switch. They meet on Wednesday nights. It's a paid gig. It was the first time in my whole life I was going to get paid to do audio. I was on cloud nine. I was like, man, this is going to be such a good gig. All the people on stage there were professional musicians. They were all really, really good musicians. So good. In fact, none of them lived locally. They all drove in from Oklahoma City an hour drive just to play the gig. Like, those are the kind of guys we were talking about. And I remember stepping up there for my first gig, and I got yelled at within like 2 minutes because things were just not going well already. It was that kind of gig, very high standards, very high standard of excellence, and I was super overwhelmed. I got through it, but it was definitely painful. But there was something about that place that had just really captured me. And, for those of you who are spiritual, I'm a very spiritual man. I believe the Holy Spirit was calling me to do something in that church. And just 2 weeks later, that worship pastor had actually moved on to another campus already. And we got a new worship pastor. And his name was Luke. Shout out to Luke if you're listening to the pod. Love you, man. You had such a big influence on my life. I'm forever grateful for you. Luke came in from another campus, and he was full of leadership, full of wisdom, and he was right around the age I am now, so not too much older than me. And I had the opportunity to learn in that space how to mix at a very high level with a lot of reps, with really good engineers and very, or really good musicians, I should say, and very high expectations. So it wasn't uncommon for me to get a lot of conversations, and I mean intense conversations like, hey, you're not cutting it. You got to do better. And fortunately, the grace was there to allow me to learn, but also the pressure was there because my livelihood now depended on me doing a good job at this gig. And I was obsessed with trying to do a good job, and I just wasn't cutting it. I would try things and it wasn't working, and I really, really needed a teacher so bad. And it would be a while before one would come. And fortunately for me, I had the grace to be able to sit in that seat and learn on my own. But at that time, MXU didn't exist, so we couldn't just pull up the MXU videos. And really the only thing you could do is you had to know somebody in the space who was willing to teach you. And quite honestly, most of them weren't willing to teach because they had to learn things themselves the hard way, and their livelihood depended on them being better than everybody else. So they weren't really willing to kind of step out and help people learn. So I kind of reached peak frustration about 6 months into the gig. And finally, I asked Luke, I said, hey man, I really need to just record a multi-track of the mix or of the band so that I can take this home and learn how to mix. I want to learn Pro Tools. I really need to learn how to mix. And he allowed me to take one multi-track recording, and I no-lifed mixing that multi-track recording. I must have mixed that same multi-track recording 20 different times, 20 different ways. I would bounce the multi-track to SoundCloud. I would listen to it in my car. It would sound absolutely abysmal. I would go back to Pro Tools, and that was during the summer of my sophomore going into junior year, I think, or junior going into senior year. Sorry about that. And I just was obsessed, and I really, really, really wanted to learn it so bad. And I learned how to mix drums in those Pro Tools sessions. I learned how to EQ toms. I learned how to EQ the kick and the snare. And every little improvement that I figured out, I would take back to the church. And at that time, I had also become their main Sunday engineer. So I was mixing 9 services a week, 2 on Wednesday nights with the youth program, and then the remainder of the services on Sunday. And eventually they added a Monday night service as well. So I was mixing from 8:30 a.m. until 10 p.m. at night, a ton of reps, super loud. We were mixing 93, 95 dBA at front of house. It was a lot, and every little thing I learned in Pro Tools, I would immediately take back to Life Church and try and make my mix better. And ultimately, over several years of doing this, by the way, my grades my senior year of college, my first semester, actually suffered because I was spending so much time mixing, and I wasn't really focused all that much on my school, which was really bad. Don't recommend that. But any little inch of ground I could take, I was trying to take to become a better engineer. And I was under a lot of pressure because, like I said, I was completely reliant on that gig. I didn't really have anybody to fall back on. So if I lost the gig, I would be in pretty big trouble, quite honestly, both financially and, I would have been kind of in a world of pain. But something was also happening too in me, both personally and professionally during this time. I wasn't just learning how to mix audio. I was also becoming a leader. I was becoming a servant. I was becoming a professional. And I was learning how to interact with people because my social skills were very rough. I was learning how to, quite honestly, become a man. And the people who were there and the people who invested in me, specifically Luke, specifically Cody, and so many others, they helped me recognize that mixing audio wasn't just about twisting things and hoping that they sound good. It was also about loving the people on stage, caring about them, and most importantly, serving them. that was a foreign concept to me. I had never really considered an audio engineer as a servant to the band. And they loved me, and they served me, and in return, they expected that I would serve them. And it was during that time I had to learn how to, if somebody was having trouble on stage, how to help them. If somebody needed an adjustment, how to interpret what they were saying to translate that to the console. I had to learn how to handle anger when the musicians were frustrated about how things were sounding, whether it was a them thing or whether it was a me thing, and how to navigate that in a way that would bring it to a resolution without causing a lot of grief and a lot of strife. And I mixed that Life Church gig for 4 years. And over that 4-year period, I can only recall around 3 times, not weekends, but 3 times, where I was absent from a service. 3 times. I got so many reps and so much experience behind the desk from that gig. And I was also developed as a leader. I was also developed as a man. And by the time I finished my stint at Life Church, I was actually 2 years into my professional career. And I decided, you know what? I need a big change. I really felt like God was calling me somewhere else. And the call came, and I moved from Oklahoma to Ohio, to a place that I'd only been once before, and I didn't even realize I had been here. I drove through here on the way to New Jersey one time on a road trip with my family growing up. And when I came to Ohio, it was for a job, but I was also on a mission. And little did I know at the time that God had brought me to Ohio to make a big difference in a local church here called One Church. And I don't take credit for any of what I'm about to talk about with you. It's all the glory goes to the Lord, and I'm just incredibly honored to have had a spot and a role to play in this transition. But when I arrived at this church, they had an incredibly good pastor and a really good band, but they sounded terrible. And I was pretty brash, and in my first meeting with the pastor, I said, hey, you're pretty good at preaching, but it sounds really bad in here. Let me help you. And of course, they were super offended by that. I don't recommend doing that. But after a little while, I kind of built up some trust and some respect with them. And 6 months after moving to Ohio, I found myself laid off from my day job. And there was just something about Ohio that I really wanted to see. But I don't know that it was as much me as it was the Holy Spirit calling to me to what was to come. And as I contemplated my future, I got a phone call for a job offer to return back to Oklahoma. And I would be making way, way more money and blah, 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 and benefits. And I would be in charge of a lot of people. And I was a pretty young guy. So, it was a very attractive offer. But there was something about that church, and there was something that needed to be done there. And I believe that God worked through me and the Holy Spirit to keep me in Ohio. And just about a month later, the senior pastor rolled the dice on me and decided that he was going to go forward with something that none of his people around him were in agreement with. He had just hired me on as the production director after I turned down that job. And I had kind of told him, I said, look, we need to upgrade the audio video lighting in here because you're really, really good, but your gear is not nearly as good as you are. Like, you guys are way, way better than you sound and you look. And he eventually, after he got over the offense of that statement, he eventually came to the table. And what an incredible leadership moment. Shout out to you, Pastor Greg. Love you, man. Give me a call. Pastor Greg said to his team, he said, look, none of you agree with this, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this big audio video remodel. And by the way, this is 2019, so think about this. we're going to do this big audio video remodel, and we're going to delay our building project that we already announced to the church, and we're going to delay that by a year so we can do this audio video remodel. And people thought he was crazy. They were like, why are we doing this? Austin's crazy. Why are they doing this? And what none of us would have known at the time was that audio video lighting remodel was just an incredible moment, because we started that audio video remodel in August of 2019, and we opened our broadcast room in February of 2020, just 2 weeks before the shutdown started. And I was not exactly the most popular person on the block, by the way, because the concept of live streaming and bringing your service to the internet at the time was, not nearly as well accepted as it is now. And even now, it's still a controversial topic. But I believe that God worked through me to really push the implementation of the live stream and the broadcast suite within the church so that we would be ready for COVID. And I had no idea COVID was coming. I was just doing what I thought was best for the church. And during this time, I was also running audio. We put a new giant stereo in the auditorium. We put a View Audio Technic AL8 Series PA in. It has dual 8-inch drivers, 4 2.5-inch drivers, and 3 beryllium tweeters, for those of you out there who are audio nerds. 8 boxes per side for a space that was 92 wide by, 75 deep or 100 deep. I can't remember the exact dimensions anymore. And we put 34 subwoofers in that auditorium. And immediately people wanted to burn me at the stake because they were like, hey, that's way too much subs. And then I had to say, look, the mains are -10 to the subs because they can't keep up. We put really good mains in, but we didn't put as good of subs in because of the budget. So actually, we don't have enough sub, and nobody likes that conversation. But anyway, go watch my video on how I got the cops called on me if you want to know what 34 subs sound like. It's a great video. Link in the description below. Those of you who are on the pod, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. But anyway, so I was mixing audio now on a really big line array PA and just a phenomenal band. And then bam, COVID struck. And during that time, some personal circumstances caused me to have to move on from the church, but I stayed around as a kind of audio contractor for the year that followed. And I just... this is me getting a phone call in the middle of the pod. I can honestly say that when COVID hit and we started having to mix down all of the services and post in Pro Tools, I can honestly say that I'm so forever thankful for the experience I had with mixing the multi-tracks from the Life Church days down, because going into that COVID season, I had a pretty good basis to start from. And I really learned how to get my mixes to sound so much better over that COVID period, week over week recording and producing and so on. And I've never been a huge, really good at studio. I'm still not good at studio, but I'm trying to get there, trying to learn it. And eventually we went back to in person, and I was the main audio guy. And around that time, I said, you know what? I'm really enjoying doing this audio thing. And why don't I start taking this more seriously? I really wanted to do audio professionally at the time, or when I was young, but I kind of abandoned that idea because I never thought I would be able to make something out of it. And wouldn't you know, and I'm going to kind of jump timeline here for a second, but wouldn't you know, back in 2018, so this is 2 years before I... COVID, and I had moved to Ohio that same year. So the year I moved to Ohio, 2018, I was at Life Church, and God gave me a vision of what was to come. And in 2018, I decided to record my very first real Austin Harman Mixes video with actual voiceover. It's a terrible video, but it's actually one of the only videos I have of me mixing on the Yamaha QL5 that they upgraded to at Life Church, with me voicing over exactly what I was doing on that desk. They had a crazy good band. It sounds absolutely abysmal because I was really bad at the time at mixing. But I really felt like God was tugging me to post that video before I moved. And things got so crazy busy when I came to Ohio, and I met my wife and got married, blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden I was back, kind of things were stable again, and I was behind the desk mixing this cool PA, and it was sounding really really good. And I thought, you know what? I've got this little tripod. Why don't I just set it up and record myself mixing? Nobody's gonna watch that crap. And little did I know that after just a few months, that video had 3,000 views, which isn't a lot, but I was really shocked at how many people had watched that video. The video is still up on my channel. It's got a little over 10,000 views at the time of this recording, and it still sounds awesome. It was just an iPhone recording. I didn't edit the sound or retouch it or anything. And as I kind of set that up, did the recording. A few months later, I decided to do it again. And after a few of those recordings, I realized I was onto something, because there wasn't a lot of people out there recording themselves mixing. So I started doing it more and then people started commenting and they started requesting videos. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I can't believe people want to watch this. And then I started filming like tutorial videos, and I really started to pour a lot of energy on the YouTube. And what's happened in 2023 with the channel is just unbelievable. Started out the year, I think, with 300 or 250 subscribers, somewhere in there, and now over 1,000 subs. Starting the podcast, really taking the content a lot more seriously, invested a ton in the setup. So behind me, I have a whole manner of gear to be able to produce all this stuff, and we're just going to keep getting better as far as making it look cool. I'm not MKBHD. His video looks incredible. Not that I'm going to get there one day, but I am an audio guy, and I'm working on the rest. But I'm just so internally grateful to have had this opportunity. And I started posting those videos, and I started having some trouble with personal things getting in the way, and there was some complaints about how loud things were and stuff, rock and roll. But eventually we installed a broadcast suite at the church. My company, the Penn Group, does audio video installs, by the way. So if you're looking for that, there's a link in the description, or you can send an email, sales@thepenn.group. And our church called us in to install the broadcast suite. We installed an Allen and Heath avantis in the broadcast suite. And because I did the install, I was one of the only people who really understood how it worked at the time, and there wasn't a lot of interest in doing broadcast. Everybody wanted to mix front of house. So I started becoming the regular broadcast guy, and have this year alone mixed broadcast over 30 times. I just got a list of all the times that I served, all volunteer, all giving up my time to serve the Lord while still getting to do YouTube and installs and all this stuff. And I'm just so thankful to have had this time with broadcast and front of house. And with the avantis, the avantis is a very popular console right now. There's a lot of churches who are, purchasing the avantis because of its functionality and capabilities. And now I have churches from all over who are calling me saying, hey, can you come help us with the avantis? I really, like your videos and stuff. And even now, as I'm recording this video, in 2 days, I'm going to jump on a plane and go visit another church. I'm so excited to go help them with their avantis. And I'm just so overwhelmed and blessed to have been able to get to this point. I genuinely believe now, with the Austin Harman Mixes channel, Austin Harman Designs, the speaker company that's to come, and the Penn Group, this is my future. This is my retirement plan. This is everything to me. It's my life's work up until this point. And I'm so happy to have gotten to document it up until this point with you. And I cannot wait to see what's to come. I hope this video was a blessing to you. This is my first podcast. So I say a video. If you're listening to it on the podcast network, I hope you've enjoyed the content. If there's something that you would like me to discuss next, I am wide open about ideas. Please do let me know. I will be starting to produce these podcasts regularly. So you're going to see a specialty video from me and a regular podcast video from me, hopefully every week. One of the things I'm going to work towards is a weekly rhythm on the podcast and a weekly rhythm on the other videos so that you get at least 2 videos a week from me. In between all the travels and everything, I'm a little bit behind on editing, but we'll get there. So I hope this video or this pod was a blessing to you. Like I said, please leave suggestions for comments or content in the comments. If you like the merch I'm wearing, for those of you who are joining us on YouTube, this is the Austin Harman Mixes official merch. You can order that at austinharmanmixes.com/shop. If you're interested in having me out to help your church, I would love to come visit you and help you with your audio setup. You can go to austinharmanmixes.com/book me if you'd like to book me to come mix for you, or if you're interested in a training, feel free to go to the Penn Group, the website, and connect with me there. I love doing this content for you guys, and it has just been such a blessing. For those of you who have seen me out there and recognized me, thank you for saying hi. That absolutely warms my heart. And I love you guys. God bless you. And I cannot wait to bring out the next one.